Hello, everyone. We are going to wait for some people to join, and they're coming fast. We're expecting quite a few people tonight. Somewhere near 100. We're at 67 now. My goodness. We'll just give it a few more minutes. Okay, we're at 80 people. Let's get started. Thank you and welcome. Happy 2022. We are going to spend a little time with Orin Martin and getting started with deciduous fruit trees. And this is going to be a little bit of an experiment this year. Next slide, please. First, a little Zoom housekeeping. In this evening sessions, we're going to have, as we always do with a webinar, your microphone will be muted, your video will be off. That is going to reserve bandwidth for the video that we're going to show. Speaker view is recommended for you, so you can see who's talking. There won't be too many individuals talking. Mostly our experiment of the day is we're going to play back last year's recorded session of this webinar that Orin did last time. And happily, in 1 year's time, everything in the world has changed except how to grow a fruit tree has not. So it's going to be the same material if you were on last year, or a refresher course in case you were on last year. There's a chat window. I want you to open your chat for comments. This will go to the entire group, or you can target one of the panelists. I am Delise Weir. I'm on the board of the Friends of the Farm and Garden. If you have questions, and we are going to do a Q&A in the beginning, the way to submit those questions is through the Q&A function. So open your Q&A window, and we will respond to those in the beginning, before the video begins, and after. And then if you want to see what's happening, if you want to see the text as sort of a closed caption, there's a live CC button at the bottom of your screen. Click that and you'll see the closed captioning. For technical assistance, you can chat with either me or Vanessa Ackerman. She's the one under Center for Agroecology in your window there. And after class, we're going to send this presentation and a link to the video and a number of other resources. So even if you don't stay for the whole thing, we will send you all the information. Next. Orin Martin is a big hit in Santa Cruz. People love him because he's been teaching for, gosh, this is last year, so it must be 44 years now, correct?
Actually 45, but close enough.
And let's go with 45. And thousands of apprentices, and he has an incredible encyclopedic knowledge of fruit trees and many, many other gardening topics. So we are very pleased to be hearing from him tonight. Next, please. And this is brought to you by the Friends of the Farm and Garden. It's a support organization for the Center of Agroecology. And if you join today or some other day, and this link I'm going to put in your chat right now so you can join if you feel like it. Chat. Here we go. Going to hosts and panelists. All right, here you have the ability to take action, but you can get 10% off anything you buy at San Lorenzo Garden Center and any plant material at Sierra Azul and the Garden Company. And that's a pretty good deal if you're buying bare root fruit trees. And for any of our in-person workshops that we're charging for this year, if we ever have another in-person workshop, it's 10% off those two. So it's a great deal. And we would love to have you participate. Next, please. So our agenda today is that we're gonna open the floor to questions for Orin. this can be questions about fruit trees. It can be questions about other things in your garden. But feel free to ask questions for about 20 minutes. If we don't have that many, we'll just start the video screening. And then we're not sure how playback is going to go. We're doing a Zoom of a Zoom. So the presentation, I will copy all these links into the chat. So if you feel the need to go view them directly without going through the Zoom, and you can see them without them kind of being problematic, you can do so. And then at the end of the video, we will we'll have a few minutes with Orin that you can talk about the material you saw today. I want to point out here these last three: selecting bare root fruit trees for beginners, site selection, and planting planting a barefoot tree. That would be a bare root tree.
Planting a bare root tree while barefooted.
That's a barefooted tree. Those are brand new videos that we have on YouTube right now, and they are excellent. So done by a professional videographer, and they're new to us. So that's a thing for you to look at later. And
If
we'll
I
send
could
those.
jump in, Delise, also feel free, if people have questions about fruit trees, to email me at Orin, O-R-I-N, @ucsc.edu.
I'll put that in the chat too. So with no further ado, let's take some questions. We can have the next slide here. And we will do some Q&A. All right, Orin, I'm getting some questions for you.
Great.
Edna, former board member of the Friends of the Farm and Garden, who's an herbalist and a teacher. Glad to see you. She's on the East Coast now. Old family farm with a few dwarf apple trees. No question, just saying hello.
Well, hello back east.
There is a tech issue. There's a small gray-black box covering a portion of the right-hand corner of the slides. Vanessa, is there something you can do about that? Maybe the lower right-hand corner if you can't get rid of it. Loretta is not seeing the notes in the chat. I haven't put them there yet, Loretta. I will share that in just a minute when I'm not reading this other screen. Oh, paste those links. Okay, I'm just going to paste those links in right now because there is high demand. And there they are. All right. Okay, Orin, finally, a question for you. Which trees do best in our climate and which should be avoided?
That's a good question. And don't you just hate it when people answer your questions that way? But it's one of the important things to think about before you plant. And I guess I would characterize it as, well, what grows reliably well in your area? And that's category one. The other is, well, what grows passably well in your area? The third category would be, what doesn't grow so well here? So when I say here, I'm talking about central coastal California, from the salt spray zone down along the ocean to the summit at about 2,000 feet. What grows really well here in terms of deciduous fruit trees are apples. Apples and pears. Plums grow really well here. And the pluot, which is a interspecific cross between a plum and an apricot, it basically devolves to the sweetest plum you've ever eaten. And that comes from the apricot. They are the above four, apples, pears, plums, pluots, are annual reliable bearers. In almost every instance, you'll get a good crop every year. Okay, moving down from that, let's talk about prune plums, which are some of the sweetest fruits on the planet, the European prune plum. They grow maybe passably well here. And if you've got a lot of space, you can invest in a few. If you don't, I would stick with apples, pears, plums, or pluots. In the same category as being passably doing passably well here would be apricots. Apricots and apriums. Again, and the aprium is a hybrid cross between an apricot and a plum. And basically it's the sweetest, it's as good as the sweetest apricot you ever ate. And I will say that in my opinion, there's only one variety of apricot to grow, and that's the variety Blenheim. The California growers call it Blenheim, but it's English, so it's pronounced Blenheim. There are a number of different apriums. An aprium, again, is 75% apricot, 25% plum. And what you get from the plum is tougher pollen, so sometimes they set better fruit in Santa Cruz than a flat-out apricot. Apricots, you'll get a good crop, 1 in 5, and a killer good crop, 1 in 5 years here. 2, maybe 3 in 5 years, you'll get no crop. And or 2, 3 years, you'll get a passable crop. So you just have to decide how much is it worth it for you. And if you have small space, maybe you're going to skip on them. It's kind of in between. Peaches and nectarines would be in the same category. They grow well here. They fruit and almost always give you a crop every year. They are subject to a wicked fungal disease called peach leaf curl, which makes it look like somebody took a blowtorch and hit the leaves on your tree. And sometimes, and an instance would be last summer where it was inordinately cool. They don't sweeten up the best, but they're probably worth growing here. Almonds, or as they call them in the valley, almonds, don't do well here. They are among the earliest of flowering crops, and they usually get wrecked. Just pollen gets ruined by the rain. It's not cold enough in the winter to get a good bloom. It's not warm enough in the summer to ripen them. So amongst the cherries, cherries are just looking for a reason to fail. And there are oh so many. But the issues with cherries along the coast, again, there's not enough chill in the winter, not enough heat in the summer. But there are a couple that are worth trialing or trying. One is called Stella, and it is a natural dwarf, whatever rootstock it's on, maybe topping out at 8 to 10 feet. What's the joke about cherries are tall? Tall cherries are for the birds, but the Stella is good. And then Lapins is another variety that ripens here, but it's a very big tree. Citrus grows reasonably well in Santa Cruz, but we're not discussing citrus tonight.
Okay, we got a whole bunch of questions that came in. Why do trees have some abundant years with lots of crop and some they don't hardly bear anything? Very general.
It's a multifactorial. Sadly, but true, so much of fruit growing is about what happens in 2-3 short weeks in the spring when the trees are in bloom. If the weather is warm, above 60, 65 degrees, if it's sunny, more, way more rather than less, and if it's not too windy, and April and May are the windy months in Santa Cruz, and April corresponds with apple bloom. What happens under those conditions? Sun, heat, low rain. Pollen is viable, or as the beekeepers say, the pollen flows. Bees fly, other winged insects, and pollinate the trees, and you get fruit set. Correspondingly, you usually have really low incidence of disease if it does not rain during the bloom period. Life is good. And the opposite is true. If it's cold and wet and windy, you're going to have problems with fruit set, and you're going to have a higher incidence of disease. That's all there is to it. So what's the weather during the bloom period? And it's variable year to year. For instance, last year we had a drought, and extremely so. It didn't rain in the bloom period, Feb through April. It's one of the few years I've seen the aforementioned peach and its wicked peach leaf curl not occur at all. So that's just about conditions. Another reason that sometimes crops will bear a heavy crop and then a light crop, and it's called alternate bearing. And here's the deal. In the spring, right around the time the fruit is forming, internally inside the branches, cells are differentiating and forming next year's flower buds. If there are too many fruit on the tree, that would be called a good year, but there can be too much of a good thing. And if you don't thin them, then there's so much of a resource drain for the tree that there's not enough resources. Resources equals carbohydrates or sugars, the byproduct of photosynthesis. There's not enough carbs for the cells to form for next year's flower buds. Now, this all assumes you're taking good care of your trees. They're well watered, they're well fertilized, pests and diseases kept somewhat at bay. Some reasons why you get variable crops.
Okay. All right, let's ask a few pruning questions. Are all water sprouts counterproductive? And can they be converted into fruit-bearing branches?
Water sprouts are difficult. Can they be converted into fruiting branches? Yeah, sometimes. Okay, what's defined terms? A water sprout is an inordinately upright, extremely vigorous shoot. And the more vigorous a shoot or branch is, the less fruitful it has the inclination to be. So they're weighted to grow and not to fruit. Upright growth, this is just a phenomenon of fruit trees. Upright growth is vigorous and grows to the sky. As with the age of the wood, the weight of the fruit, or you as a tree trainer, the branch comes down towards horizontal. The hormonal setup in the branch says, anthropomorphically, fruit don't grow. So if you have a water sprout and you can train it down to maybe 45 or 60 degrees, you might, and not prune it in the winter, which is stimulating, you might be able to convert it into a fruitful branch. I've found that unless it's dire circumstances, lose them, put them on the ground, thin them. If you need to work with it, like I said, moderate it by training it 45 degrees or so, and just leave it alone. And it might, in the second or third year, set up fruit for you.
Great. You know too much, Orin. What's the best way of dealing with apple moth?
The cuddling moth. Grow pears. No. It is the most insidious of pests with apples. And incidentally, it does get on pears and walnuts a little bit. And I didn't mention walnuts, but walnuts grow really well in Santa Cruz. The trouble with them is they're very tall. But at any rate, cuddling moth. Basically, you want to have good orchard sanitation, and you can employ a number of strategies. When I say good orchard sanitation, as the fruit has set and starts to size up, usually in May or June, if you go around and examine your fruit, you will see what are called little stings. It's a little bullseye red circle where the coddling moth has oviposited, laid an egg, and begot the next generation of coddling moths. That egg will hatch as the larvae crawls to the center cavity of the apple. It's protected, it's warm, it's moist, it's got a good food source, the flesh of the apple. It'll hang and engage and engorge for a couple, 3 weeks, and then crawl out and become the next generation. So if you see any of these stings, get them off the tree, get them out of the system. Other things you can do is there's now a marvelous set of strategies that are generally called pheromone strategies. And what they've done is they synthesize the female sex scent for the coddling moth. So you can get what are called wing traps. They have a little globule in the center, and it will attract other coddling moths. And it's a sticky bottom, and it kills them. The other thing is and this doesn't work reliably well on small blocks, but I use it on small blocks and I'm convinced it works pretty good. There are what are called pheromone dispensers, or little wrap. They look like little twist tie wraps that you wrap around the branch. You put them up high in the canopy, and it floods the area with the female sex pheromone of the coddling moth. And this strategy used to be called male confusion, but then some of the ag guys got a little nervous, so they call it mating disruption. So what happens is it's heavier in air and it floods the canopy of the tree, and by extension the whole planting, and the male locates the female to mate by her emission of the sex pheromone. And so the male literally flies around aimlessly and is unsuccessful at mating, and in some cases actually it's calorically exhaustive and it dies. In some cases, it becomes habituated to the stimulant, no longer responds. You know how sometimes you drink a cup of coffee, and then you need 2 to get going in the morning. So there's some things you can do. In the cooler years, like last year, you'll have much less cuddling moth problem than in the hotter years. So it's good to start early with your preventative strategy. That's patrolling the orchard, getting rid of stings, putting up either a pheromone trap or the pheromone dispensers. Don't let your pressures build up high. It's really hard to work backwards down.
Right.
And there's no real research literature on this, but some varieties are more susceptible than others. It's a bit of a trial and error type of thing. One thing I've found is a lot of golden delicious types, or that is apples that have golden delicious in its parentage, which are marvelous apples across the board. They have a big open calyx hole in the bottom, and that's a good entry point for the moth. So there you go.
Okay. Interesting question here. I lost a young plum tree to shot hole borer. Should I sanitize the site before planting another bare root tree?
Yeah, breaking news. I just learned something last week from a former student, a really good friend, and a downright tree whisperer type of individual. Matthew Sutton, he runs Orchard Keepers. If you need help with your trees in any respect, orchardkeepers.com, they're just fabulous people. But he sent me an article saying that they now think that shot hole on plums is not a disease, not caused by a borer, that it's a physiological syndrome, and it's often caused by stress. So try to be good to your tree. Good water, good fertility, lack of weeds and all that. So previously I would spray with sulfur because I thought it was a fungus.
Interesting. Okay, things have changed since last year then.
It changed this last week for me.
All right, so Olivia thinned her peaches more severely than usual last year. And the fruits were large, but a number of the fruit had split pit problems. Do you think that was related?
No, you done good. You need to thin. You need to thin to about 5-6 inches. You want good sized peaches. Split pit is sometimes caused by stress in the year prior to this one. So take good care of your tree. And it also is, you can do everything right, and occasionally you have split pit, double pit.
Okay. Do you have a favorite eating apple to grow that's not one you can buy in a store?
Yeah, you got about 2 or 3 hours. I can list a couple hundred.
About 3.
Okay. I'm partial to what are called russeted apples. And amongst them is one I think you'll like. I like it, but I don't love it. I mean, I like it a lot. Is Hudson's Golden Gem. And it's almost pear-like in its consistency and its honeyness. Maybe my favorite 2 russeted types would be Golden Russet and Roxbury Russet. Now I'm biased here. I'm from Boston. The inner city in Boston is Roxbury. In the 1700s, when this apple first was grown, it was farms. So russet types are just amongst some of the better apples on the planet. And you by and large won't be able to get them in stores. You might not, with a rare exception, you won't get them at farmers market either.
Good tip. We've had a couple of questions about interplanting, companion planting, and cover cropping. What would you plant around fruit trees?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean by interplanting, but I would offer a word of caution to not have too much competition in the root zone of the fruit tree. That is competition for water and nutrients. And the other thing is it's somewhat difficult to grow things inside the drip line, the canopy of the tree in the summer because it's shady. You could try to grow a perennial, low-growing perennial clover like Alsike clover or New Zealand clover, rose clover. They're a little difficult to establish, but they can establish, and they shield the ground, protect soil, and fix nitrogen. They will take more water than if you're not growing them under the tree. I recommend cover crops in the winter, annual cover crops such as bell beans, vetch, oats, and peas. As far as companion in a sense of this likes this and this doesn't like that, I don't know of any substantive evidence about either allelopathy, antagonisms, or companionate stuff like that with fruit trees. I'm not saying there aren't any. I don't know.
Okay. We have a couple of questions about ants and keeping ants out of fruit trees.
Yeah.
Tips there?
There's the red Argentinian ant, and there's a big black ant. And the problem is they get up into the tree. They usually are attracted by the bloom, the scent of the bloom, and the pollen. They like to predate on aphids, and they actually will protect the aphids from their predators. There are a number of different beetles and other winged insects that will predate on aphids. So they, in a sense, they herd them or they farm them. So the best way to keep ants off the tree is to make sure no branches are touching the ground, no plants, no grass, no nothing is acting as a bridge up into the foliage of the tree. And then you can apply a substance that is called tanglefoot. Looks like a gooey goppy petroleum jelly. What it is it's plant-based, and it's just a sticky substance you put around the base of the collar. You need to put about a 5-inch height of it, put it on pretty thick, and it's just that a physical barrier. It keeps the ants from climbing up on the tree. Now, sometimes it's going to adversely affect the bark of the tree, so it might be advised to put a little ring of cardboard and put the tanglefoot on the cardboard, but make sure it's secured tightly to the trunk, otherwise they'll go underneath the cardboard and up onto the tree. That's the standard remedy. So you do this just prior to bloom, before they get on the tree.
Okay. I'm just gonna, let's do 3 more of these questions and then I'll start the video. A couple of people have mentioned container fruit trees. And how can you make them do better? They're struggling. There's a fig, a couple citrus.
Citrus is okay. Citrus is amenable to being grown in containers. I would use at least a 20-gallon pot or a half wine barrel. And if you get a good soil mix, things should go well. If you get a dwarf rootstock, and that's mostly what's offered in the nurseries these days, but make sure you do. And you grow something that is small in stature itself, in addition to the rootstock, that would be things like the Meyer lemon, almost all of the mandarin oranges, and even some of the sweet oranges. You should be able to do it really well. Now, citrus is pretty demanding. It requires fertilizations every 4-6 weeks or so. And because you're growing in a container, you need to pay careful attention to water. You cannot let it go through water stress. It's not a bad idea to try to grow figs in a container similar size, half wine barrel, 20-gallon or bigger. One of the issues with figs is they can be pretty rambunctious and big, and a way to size them down is put them in a container. There is a fig, which is excellent, and it grows pretty well here on the coast and ripens, called blackjack, which is a sort of a natural dwarf. So that's what I would recommend. There's another fig, perversely with the name of Desert King, that does well on the coast here, and it is a little more vigorous. But I would go with blackjack as my my fig of choice for a container.
Fig of choice. We've had a couple of questions about summer versus winter pruning and when the best time is to prune fruit trees.
Those are the 2 principal times when you prune trees, although I have to say I always have my shears in my back pocket, and every time I'm out in the orchards, I'll do a little touch-up pruning if that's appropriate. But winter pruning, I'll make the analogy, winter pruning, summer pruning. Winter pruning is, hey, you're building a house. Winter pruning is the foundation slab, the framing, the roof. Summer pruning is the tile work, the cabinetry, the finished stuff like that. You establish a tree in the early years with, and I'm going to say years 1 through 3, 4, or 5, with winter pruning. And the principle, very briefly, is when you cut back a branch, and the more you cut back a branch, this is called a heading cut, the stronger and longer the resultant growth will be in the next season. So early in the tree's life, you want to double, triple the size of the tree each of the first few years so you can get to that object of our desires, fruit. A tree will not fruit until it's formed all its structural parts. So winter pruning to establish a tree, summer pruning to refine the form and structure and keep sunlight into the core of the tree. There's another thing which is beyond the scope of tonight's presentation in summer pruning with apples and pears in a methodical way. By summer pruning laterals, you can induce quick fruiting. That is, a lateral branch will take 2 or 3 years and then fruit. With summer pruning, it can sometimes fruit in the next year. So I use both in tandem, but again, one is about the major constructive part of the tree, the other is about refinement.
Great. Okay, 2 last, quick. Do you have an avocado you like for this area?
No, but the Forte types grow way better fruit, more reliably, and flavor up better than the Haas types. They're also more cold tolerant. There is one Haas type called Haas Lamb, like Lamb, which is pretty reliable in this area. And for an avocado, let me stipulate, for an avocado, it's a little bit less vigorous. You probably can keep it at 12 to 15 feet.
Okay. And last question, talk about dormant spray, dormant oil or copper. Does it need to have?
Yeah, your products of choice for the controlling of insects, soft-bodied insects, aphids, scale, and the like, are oils. And now there used to be pretty heavy viscosity petroleum oils. Now there are lighter vegetable oils, soy oil, things like that. Neem oil, which is very effective, but it stinks to high heaven. Oils are sprayed on a tree in their late dormancy. It's called delayed dormant spray, to literally cover and suffocate the eggs or the young of soft-bodied insects like aphids. So that's your organically approved insecticide. Fungicides for fruit and leaf fungal diseases. You can use either sulfur or copper products. They're certified organic, and they're usually sprayed during but towards the end of dormancy, or even when at what's called green tip stage, when the tips of the buds are just showing some green, they're about to open into a leaf. And you can use either copper or sulfur. I prefer copper for several reasons. It doesn't stink as much as sulfur. It also comes in a liquid form, which is easier to put in the tank and spray on the tree and get it to stick on the tree. Sulfur comes in a powder. You have to make a paste and then get it to mix in with the water like that. But sulfur and copper are your approved fungicides for fruit trees.
All right, there are some more questions. I'm sorry if we didn't get to yours. Maybe we can do it at the end.
Sure, or you can email me, fine.
Or you can email Orin. I've put his email in the chat. If you need it again, I can add it again. But we're going to ask Vanessa to cue up the video, and a lot of these questions will be answered by that. So we'll see you in about an hour and 7 minutes.
Before we get to the agenda here, I usually start these things by reading something, a quote or something. And I was already intending to read these short verses, but in light of the unsettling events in Washington, D.C. today, I feel them to be all the more pertinent, and I really hope that in some small measure, they can convey both persistence and hope. So this is 2 short poems by that icon of the Harlem Renaissance, Langston Hughes. So on persistence. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. And on hope, well, it's actually entitled Hope. Sometimes when I'm lonely, don't know why, keep thinking I won't be lonely by and by. All right, keep on keeping on, folks. Let's move on. You see the, oh, we can go back. You see the agenda here. Let's go back to the previous slide for a second, Elise, if we can. This is what we're going to try to cover. And I'm going to start off here with a little, we go to the next slide, a little soliloquy of sorts. You know, a soliloquy, a speech in a play in which the actor, the character stands on the stage and speaks their thoughts aloud and alone. So I'll read a little piece and then we'll get into just regular talking here. But well, let's just go to the next slide and I'll read. It said on the previous slide, sunlight is paramount, and indeed it is. You're going to need at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight on your fruit trees from the time they bloom to the time they fruit. Now, for those of you who live in a mild climate like this, a little shade, as it were, on the trees in the off season, the fall to spring, can help with winter chill. That is to enforce their dormancy. We'll talk about that more later. But sunlight is important. Sunlight fuels photosynthesis. Photosynthesis, which is the most important reaction on the planet. Photosynthesis first forms and then grows and finally fruits the tree. And remember that old fruit grower pseudo haiku. The more sunlight you intercept, the more fruit you get. Okay, that's 13 and not 17 syllables. And you know, I've never heard a fruit grower start off a haiku, but still. And then maybe to close out this little soliloquy, which is of course about sunlight, and that is paramount. We could steal, as it were, borrow the logo of University of California, which says Fiat Lux, let there be light. So at the most basic level, fruit tree growers are harvesters of sunlight. The sun provides the energy that is converted from light to manufacture sugars and dry matter by the process of photosynthesis, which happens in the leaves. The tree uses these sugars, carbohydrate sugars, produced from photosynthesis to do everything it does, to make cells, to make all its parts, root, shoot, flower, fruit, and leaf, and as an energy source to fuel its metabolism. So sunlight, the sugars produced by photosynthesis, it's kind of like a sourdough starter, or maybe a good cup of French roast in the morning. Really kicks things off. You just need to ensure wherever you're going to site your trees that they're going to get a minimum of 6 to 8 hours of sunlight a day. 8 to 10 in truth would be better. You can, in growing trees, almost everything we do is in support of photosynthesis. It's from site selection to water. There, in textbooks, it says photosynthesis happens in an aqueous solution. That means water in the leaves. In order, if it's a sunny day, you can take advantage of that. You can have the tree photosynthesize optimally, make sugars and grow itself if there is enough water first in the soil and then up into the tree in the leaves. So that's important. The act of improving your soil via cover cropping, fertilizer itself, or compost is also paramount in supporting photosynthesis. Providing nutrients and organic matter, again, will help grow the tree. Your goal is to grow a big tree and to grow it quick. Big tree has branches, big tree has leaves along the branches. Again, the leaves are the manufacturing plant for photosynthesis and grow the tree. In fact, when we get to pruning next week, pruning is really largely about sunlight, creating a geometric form of a tree so that sunlight hits all portions of it, to facilitate sunlight and photosynthesis. So enough said, I guess. Sunlight is paramount. Let's go to the next slide here. Site selection. Site selection is, of course, critical. And you have a bunch of factors you can consider, but I find a lot of times with a home grower, the home gardener, it's not so much you going out and looking for a site. You got what you got. So in a sense, you could say that the site selects you. But again, make sure you're out away from the house, other buildings, trees, so you have a good arc of sunlight, 6 to 8 hours, 8 to 10 hours like that. But if you do have a choice, and you can, you might think about siting your trees on a slight slope, a gentle south-facing slope in the northern hemisphere, a gentle north-facing slope in the southern hemisphere will give you a little more grow power. You can see in this slide here, this is a depiction of how the sun strikes the ground, slope and flat ground. The way it works is on a slope, and we're talking a gentle slope, certainly under 8 degrees, maybe 2 to 4 degrees, a gentle south-facing slope. The sun will strike the ground almost or closer to 90 degrees or perpendicular straight on, you might say. And in doing that, its rays are concentrated and it delivers more sunlight energy, which begets both air and soil warmth. A south-facing slope with this little boost from the concentrated rays of the sun will warm a little quicker in the morning, stay a little warmer longer into the evening, warm a little quicker seasonally in the spring coming out of winter, and similarly stay warm longer into the fall. And just a little bit of a slope will aid you in that regard. Flat ground is good too, but the sun's rays will be more dispersed as they hit the ground. It's not bad, it just doesn't have that much grow power. Another alternative not depicted in this slide would be a north-facing slope. North-facing slopes are cooler and the least preferable of all aspect. Aspect is a term that's used in geography and agroecology. It means the direction that a slope faces. So a south aspect, that's good. Second to that, maybe a southeast aspect, so that you get quick warming in the morning, quick drying out after a rain like that. A southwest slope would be, if I lived in Santa Cruz, well, matter of fact, I do, cool coastal conditions here, we get a lot of morning fog. So a southwest slope would probably be a little more advantageous than a southeast facing slope, in that there's more sun in the afternoon, stay longer into the evening like that. Okay, we can go to the next slide. This is whenever I see that, this is from a book I wrote. It's called Fruit Trees for Every Garden. I think there's a slide at the end by 10 Speed Press, published it. And I was trying to talk to them about some visuals. So I had a literal file folder, and I drew a little thing on like this on it, trying to say, we need to have something that talks about the lay of the land. And I held it up, and I was in a room with a bunch of professionals, and they all kind of got ghostly white and snickered a little bit. But they were able to make this out of what I scrawled on the paper. So look at this. This is, again, you've got on the left, a north-facing slope. We're just going to rule that out. And on the south, on the right, a south-facing slope with a little step bench. You see where right above the arrow that says south slope, and then flatland like that. So let's kind of compare and contrast facing slopes assumed and flat ground. South-facing slopes are warmer, as mentioned, but they could be windy, particularly at the top of the slope. Down more, they're more protected. And I think on a slope, if you had your druthers, as they used to say in the 70s, if you have a little step or a bench, as you see here again under the south slope arrow there, that's probably the best of all situations. It's sheltered, not like the top of the slope. It's a little bit flat, easier to work. One of the disadvantages of slopes is they're just hard to work, whether it's by hand or a tractor like that. Then you get down to flat ground like that. Other things about slopes, they're usually much better in terms of frost. Cold air drains down slope, settles in the bottomland. South slopes are going to be much more frost free. And this is critical during the bloom period when the trees are in bloom. Most deciduous fruits have very low tolerance, even a few, apricots being the most finicky. A degree or 2 of frost will just knock out the blooms and you won't get a crop like that. So that air drainage is good, but also on a slope, what you get is soil or water drainage. It's facilitated by the angle of the slope. But as Ronald Reagan once said to Mikhail Gorbachev, trust, but verify. Okay, don't assume your slope has good drainage. Do a perk test. What's a perk test? You simply dig a hole about a foot wide, a foot deep, fill it with water, let it drain. Come back and rinse, repeat. Come back and fill it again. And it should drain within 1 to 3 hours. If it does that, you're good with drainage. If it drains quicker than an hour, it means you have an extremely sandy soil, and this is problematic. What's the solution? Organic matter that is delivered to the soil via cover crops and compost. And if it takes longer than 3 hours, it probably means you have a clay. And again, and that implies poor drainage in this instance. And what's the solution? Again, cover crops and compost to open up that tight, sticky clay. But generally slopes, even again, just a gentle slope in the yard will have a little better drainage. Let's get down to the bottomland. Some of the richest land in the world is at the bottom of hills, valleys, these alluvial floodplains that give us the breadbasket soils of the world. Flat ground, well, hey, it's flat. That's an advantage. You can work it easier again, whether by hand or with a tractor. Flat ground, a little less of a microclimatic boost from the sun's rays. Yeah, that's true. And there may be drainage problems. Again, do a perk test. A big problem if you have a noticeable hill and a bottomland is as that cold air drains down the slope, it settles at the bottom of the hill, and indeed bottomland is often referred to as a frost pocket, and that again, that can be extremely deleterious like that. Your bottomland will have deep soil. Your slope will have less skinnier soil. Your bottomland will be easier to work. The slope is a little gnarly, but you can do it if it's a gentle slope like that. The bottomland will be wind protected. The slope, as you go up it, will be a little more wind exposed like that. So some things to think about in siting your trees. But I'd also say in siting your trees, maybe this is the coda or the outro to siting your trees here, is put them where you can see them. What's that old expression? Out of sight, out of mind. Don't let that be you. I say the opposite of that is proximity leads to prosperity. If you go by your trees daily in the side yard, on the walk, if you can see them out the window as you're washing the dishes in the morning, as you're sitting enjoying a beverage, maybe an adult beverage in the evening, listening to a soundtrack of your choice. Mine might be John Coltrane, but that's up to you. You see them and you can you're prompted to take care of them in a timely manner, but also you can enjoy them. You can watch them as they grow. You can watch them in terms of the seasons. One of my favorite sites is in the growing of the persimmon. It has a really interesting architecture, and it's kind of like a downy bark in the winter. It's cool. And at least out in the summer, it's kind of dull leaves. It's really dull, boring, hard to see green flowers, a little nubbin green fruit. And then the season progresses into midsummer and then into fall, and you get these large, almost glowing orange globes. And then one day, as the temperatures drop in mid-late fall, boom, the leaves will go from green to fiery red orange, all ablaze. And it's just, what a sight. Now, if you can watch that out your window as you walk down the walk, isn't that cool? And then a wind will come up a few days later, whew, the tree will be bare, but with these orbs of orange, it almost looks like a mythological fruit. And then you have this beautiful carpet of fiery red orange leaves. Use the leaves either in making compost or just leave them there as a mulch in place. So that's the outro to site selection. Let's move on. Okay. It's that time of year. 'Tis the season for planting bare root fruit trees. And most people, and I am in the subset of most people too, what's your first impulse? Grab a spade, grab a tree, dig a hole, plant the tree. Don't be that person. I'm going to echo the chorus to a very early Marvin Gaye song before he reached the fullness of Marvin Gaye with What's Going On, and he did a great, I heard it through the grapevine, but early on in his career, he had the song, and the chorus went, don't you do it, don't you do it, don't you break my heart. You only have one shot at improving the soil before you plant the tree. These trees are long-lived specimens. An apple tree can easily live 75 to 100 years. There are pears in the hills of Tuscany that are carbon dated to be in excess of 200 years. They're gnarly, but they're still producing like that. Even the shortest lived of all the deciduous species, apricots and peaches, will live 30, 40 years like that. So make sure you do a few things before you plant. One, you would want to, as the slide says here, you want to assess and then improve your soil before planting. Assessing your soil has two main components. One is you simply get a soil lab test. I recommend this lab, A&L Western Lab. If you're in other regions of the country, there's an A&L South Lab, an A&L North Lab, East Lab, and on. They're really reliable. And if you tell them what you're growing, in this instance, fruit trees, and you tell them you're growing organically, I'm hoping you do, they'll give you very specific recommendations regarding organic fertilizers, how much to put on per, they usually give it for the gardener in either 100 or 1,000 square foot, how many pounds per 100 or 1,000 square feet, like that. So do that. That's like a baseline study with your soil. Tells you very much what nutrients are in your soil and at what levels. It tells you what the pH is. It's pretty cut and dry. It's not everything about a soil, but it's really important baseline information. For instance, if you don't have adequate levels of phosphorus, the tree or anything else will not grow well. You have to go and get a phosphorus source, of which there are innumerable ones and organic ones, put it on the soil, do another test, they say 3-6 months later, and see if you're up to snuff with your phosphorus, like that. So that's a very easy thing, maybe cost you 30, 40 bucks. Could be the best 30, 40 bucks you're ever going to spend, folks. Another way of assessing the soil is a qualitative assessment. And that's simply looking at it visually, doing a field test, and there are a number of things that I'm not going to go into today, but I would love to have one of these sessions where we did assessing your home garden soil, and we could do some short videos and show you the deal. But quickly, darker soils are richer. They have more organic matter. As you move from sort of pale, brown, black, black is the best. Black is beautiful. It's the richest soil, indicates high organic matter with its associated nutrients like that. And you pick up a handful of soil and you kind of feel it and thumb through it like that. And you want a soil that has that's crummy. It's good crumb structure is what it's called. So you want a crummy soil. That's C-R-U-M-B-Y. You don't want a crummy soil. C-R-U-M-M-Y. So what's growing in your soil? How vigorous is it? There are a number of qualitative indicators that can help you with your soil. Dig a pit. It's called a profile. You know, as above, so below. That's a nice philosophical thing, but it ain't necessarily so with soil. You can have a beautiful topsoil. You may go down a foot. You may have some sort of encumbrance, rocks, or the soil may turn very quickly from a rich topsoil to a very sticky clay soil. You need to know this and take action. Okay, taking action. I've coined it the 3 C's. Cultivation, which is just a fancy word for tillage, digging on a garden scale, plowing on a farm scale. Cultivation, compost, and cover crops. The 3 C's, this drives the engine of your soil. You probably should have started, if you want to plant trees now, you probably should have started in the fall, maybe September, October, November. Maybe if your soil wasn't so good, maybe started in July or August, or maybe if it's really not that good, you should have started last year and engaged in a really strenuous regimen of soil improvement with deep tillage, compost, and cover crops. So woulda, coulda, shoulda, that's nice. It's not too late. If you live out here in Central Coast of California, now's the time to plant trees. Back east in the north, a little month or 3 later. But you could do this now. Well, it's a little dark now, so maybe tomorrow morning. But what you do, whatever the area is utilizing the 3 C's to improve your soil to make it suitable for planting a tree that will live a long time. Whatever area you're going to grow in, it could just be one tree, a 4 square foot area, or 10 trees or 100 trees, doesn't matter. But go out to that area. If there's any vegetation on it, weeds or anything else, skim it off with a spade, spread it evenly over the whole area, chop it with a spade or a machete. That'll help it break down quicker. And then engage in some deep tillage, as I said. On a garden scale, it would be good to double dig a raised bed. On a field scale, you use what's called a chisel plow, and it rips the soil at depth. But before you do that, you designate the area you're going to grow in. You skim weeds, spread, chop them, and then you put on compost before you dig. By pre-applying compost, whatever depth you dig to, that compost will be uniformly spread through that depth, and that's a good thing. So pre-spread the compost. How much? It varies, but if you just have one or a few trees, I would spread about 1 spadeful per square foot. If you're working on a farm scale, about 5 tons to the acre. Okay, you've delineated the area, you've skimmed and chopped the weeds on the surface, you've applied compost, and then you engage in deep tillage. This will work this material, both the green material and the compost, into the depth that you dig. And then I would come and I would broadcast sow a cover crop. If you're doing this in the fall, I would use what we in the trade call BVOP. That's a combination of bell beans, vetch, oats, and peas. The legumes fix nitrogen. That's bell beans, vetch, and peas. They also have a biodrill taproot that goes down and essentially deep digs your soil. The grasses, well, some of the richest soils in the world are formed over perennial grasses. I give you the Great Plains of the Midwest, the steppes of Russia, and these soils are the breadbasket soils of the world. They're in a soil order called the malt soils. Mala meaning soft, less in to mollify like that. And they're the richest soils in the world. But they got that way because they had perennial grasses growing on them for millennia. The nature of grasses and their roots is they're very fibrous and rug-like. And they just work the soil, physically work the soil, break it up. You couldn't work the soil any better with a garden fork than grass roots can. So BVOP, bell beans, vetch, oats, and peas. You also could use mustard. Utilitarian and good. It doesn't fix nitrogen, but it really forages for nitrogen. It doesn't fix nitrogen biologically like a legume does, but it forages for nitrogen that's in the soil. Takes it up, sequesters it in its plant parts, and then when you chop it into the soil, releases that nitrogen again. Mustard is also good at concentrating phosphorus and calcium. If it's summertime, say you said, you know, I'm going to plant next January fruit trees. Yeah, my soil's really not that good. I'm going to start a cover cropping program in July or August. Use buckwheat or Sudan grass. And they are two things on the opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of their makeup and their vigor. Buckwheat, I call it a mighty mite. It gets like knee high at the most. It's this stringy little plant. You look at the roots and you say, what roots? And yet you grow it as a cover crop, chop it into the soil, and it improves soil structure like nobody's business. It's phenomenal. It is also a good forager for phosphorus. So it's good at cycling phosphorus. Sudan grass is kind of just the opposite. Scatter the seed, duck and cover. It'll grow 6 to 8 feet in 6 to 8 weeks. And you want to take it down before it gets too big. It's really hard to chop down and chop up. So maybe when it's thigh to chest high, you chop it down, turn it back into soil. So summer cover crops, buckwheat and Sudan grass. Fall, winter cover crops, BVOP or mustard. BVOP again being bell beans, vetch, oats, and peas. Okay, you've got you sown your cover crop. What I'm going to suggest is that you mulch, you just rake on a garden scale, broadcast sow it relatively evenly, rake it in with a metal bow rake, just so it's slightly covered, and then mulch the whole area. Again, 1 tree, 4 by 4, many trees, big an area as you've delineated like that. Then you want to mulch that soil so it's not open, particularly going into the fall, winter. You want to shield it from the rains. And you have a lot of choices. Typical choices would be straw, not hay. Hay has seeds, you're not really interested in that. Leaves, broadleaf deciduous trees. We don't have a lot of those species in our climate, but if you can get them, they're good. And the third one, which is my preferred mulch for fruit trees. And again, let me stress, it would be, first of all, it would be wood chips. Any type of wood chips, it really doesn't matter. They could be broadleaf, they could be conifers, they're all good. I've been using them for 40 years, and I don't want to sound like a used car salesperson or an evangelist, but I could preach a sermon on the benefits of wood chips, how they reduce water loss, how they ramp up soil biology, and after you get going for a year or two, how they very quickly break down, considering they're almost pure, well, wood like that. So I'll put on a layer as much as 3 to 5 inches, and I do it in spring and then again in fall. Okay, so you've sown your cover crop, you put a mulch down in some fashion, water accordingly, go away, go write the Great American Novel. Come back when that cover crop is again still lush and green, hasn't gotten kind of carbonaceous and woody, isn't quite flowering yet. Maybe when again it's at least knee high, maybe waist high, a little higher. And then you drop it and chop it. What do I mean by that? You take it and you cut it at the base. You can use a spade, you can use a machete, you can use a weed whip, and then you chop it up into small pieces. And then you mulch right over that again. And you sow more cover crop. And so you get this perennial mulch cover crop system. At some point in there, I would delineate where I'm going to put the trees. And at some point in this climate now is the bare root planting season through the end of February, I would dig my hole and plant my trees. But you only got one shot to improve your trees, your soil for your trees, so don't blow it. Maybe we could, you got to give it your best. So we could echo Pat Benatar in her song, "Hit Me with Your Best Shot." Okay, next slide. Let's talk, let me just say, these are tags that are on Dave Wilson trees. You might find a better fruit tree nursery somewhere in the world than Dave Wilson, but you'd have to, I can't imagine that you would. In this area, almost all nurseries stock their trees. If you want to buy direct from them, you'd have to buy 200 trees, and we're probably not going to do it. The trees are the range of varieties, the range of rootstocks, the range of species of fruits, the quality, it's excellent like that. But what are some of your other choices you need to make before you plant the tree? Obviously, what are you going to grow? Apples, pears, peaches, plums, your choice. We'll get to what grows well in Santa Cruz in a few slides down the road here. But something you want to, in the variety, that's up to you too. I have thousands of recommended varieties. But after you choose your variety, probably your most important choice is selecting a rootstock. When you look at a fruit tree, there are actually 2 genetically distinct individuals that have been fused together by grafting. So you have the top part of the tree, the variety, Fuji apple, Bartlett pear, Santa Rosa plum, etc. This is known as the scion, S-C-I-O-N. So you have the scion Fuji, the scion Santa Rosa. And then from the base of the trunk through the root system, this is the rootstock. They are 2 distinct genetic individuals that have been grafted together into one, a compound thing. When we think of rootstocks, they do a number of things for the tree, to the tree, for you. But the main things we think about when we think about rootstocks is tree size. And so the notion comes up of full size, semi-dwarfing, and fully dwarfing rootstocks. We'll get to some specifics in a few minutes here. But rootstocks control tree size quite a bit. And the other thing to keep in mind, the more dwarfing your root system, the more precocious the tree is. And that is actually a word that's used in the fruit industry. Age. The more dwarfing the rootstock, the quicker quicker in its life that tree will come into fruiting. So dwarf trees are precocious. Hey, much like Mozart, a precocious lad allegedly writing sonatas at age 3 to 5. So the dwarf tree will come into bearing earlier. how different in terms of bearing? If you take a semi-dwarf rootstock, get you maybe an 8, 10, 12-foot tree like that of apples, it'll start to have a few fruit on it at 3 to 5 years of age. It'll have a pretty much full fruiting capacity at 5 to 8 years of age. If you take some of those big, marvelous, old, full-size apple trees, 20 by 20, 20 by 30, it probably take 8 to 10 years before they have any fruit on them, and 15 to 20 years before they hit their stride and are mature bearing trees. So a dwarf rootstock tree will be smaller. You can get more trees in a given space. It'll come into life smaller. It makes it easier and safer to take care of. It'll come into bearing earlier. And if you were to analyze, and it's done, the fruit bearing capacity, production component, dwarf trees out yield big trees. They don't on a per tree basis, but if you measure, and they have, what are the pounds of fruit as per the volume of the canopy? The dwarf tree is more productive than the larger tree. You can get more dwarf trees in a given space. So on a per area basis, dwarf trees out yield big trees. I mean, there's nothing more marvelous than having a 30-foot apple tree you can put a swing in, push the kids on it, sit in the shade, drink a mint julep and all that, but they're really impractical for care. I recommend semi-dwarf rootstocks. Let's move to the next slide. It's a little schematic, so be it, moving on. Okay, there are quite a few rootstocks out there, and I've grown most of them over 40 years. But here are my recommendations. And even, well, let's take apples. Okay, a lot of rootstocks, especially apples, are alphanumeric. They have a letter and then a number. What's up with that? What's going on? As Marvin Gaye once intoned. It's just this clunky thing. The letter is an abbreviation for where that rootstock was developed or bred. In this case, M is for Malling in England, a very famous English rootstock breeding station. And B here is for, it's short for Bargovsky, which is just really cool to say. It's a Russian concern. G is short for Geneva. Geneva Testing Station associated with Cornell University is one of the most remarkable research stations in the world for fruit trees like that. So that's what the letter means, and the number, and I wish they hadn't done this, all that the number means is M27. At Malling, they had a bunch of rootstocks they were testing for their dwarf nature. They trialed them out, and hey, that one in plot 27, that looked real good. Let's clone that and sell it to the world. So it was just the plot that it was in. And they've done us an extreme disservice, because when they released them, they should have renumbered them as 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is small, 2 is medium, like that. It's not that way. For instance, M27 is smaller than M26. It's just the way it is. There are charts. So let's look at these apple rootstocks. M27 is a true dwarfing rootstock for apples. You could grow it in a half wine barrel or 20, 25 gallon pot. So those of you who want to grow deciduous trees in a pot, go for this mini dwarf or M27 rootstock. B9 is a little more vigorous. Another thing that about rootstocks, which really doesn't apply if you live in California, is some rootstocks are much more cold tolerant than others. B9, Bargovsky 9 is very much that way. Russian rootstocks and Polish rootstocks are bred for extreme cold hardiness because they're trying to push the production of apples way up latitudinally. Yes, there are Siberian orchards. And what they're shooting for is, what is the average expected snowpack in these northern areas, say 5 feet? We want a tree that's under that because snow is a huge insulating blanket. Anyhow, M27, mini dwarf, B9, pretty good. The Geneva series are new in a sense that they're just recently on the market. And these are 2 good ones that will give you a nice compact tree, 6 to 10 feet. M26 and M7 are good as well. M111 is about the most vigorous dwarfing rootstock you can get, coming in at 15 to 18 feet. And you'll see all of these have a range, 4 to 6 feet, 6 to 8 feet, etc. What's up with that? What's up with that is that while rootstock is the prime driver of size, whatever the variety is, it contributes a secondary vigor factor. So some varieties are more vigorous than others. Let's take Fuji. It's like a tsunami. It's a monster. It just grows like crazy. Let's take one of my favorite apples, an old English apple called Cox's Orange Pippin. It's about the weakest variety on the plant. So if I put up a Fuji on a M111, it'll be 18, maybe even 20 feet tall. If I put a Cox's Orange on an M111, it'll be 50, maybe only 12 feet tall. So there's some variability there. With pears, okay, so apples have the most steps along the gradient from dwarf to full-size rootstocks. With the other fruits, not so much. With pears, there are full-size and semi-dwarfing rootstocks. And it really, just to cut to the quick, the only one I would use is this one here, Old HF333. It's Old Home Cross Farmingdale 333. The Old Home is, they found this rootstock, this stump of a tree that looked like a rootstock that had dwarfing capability, and they found it on an old homestead, Old Home. And then Framingham, or Farmingdale rather, is a research station in Illinois. And this again was the 333rd plot like that. That's the rootstock you want to get. With stone fruits, there aren't real stone fruit, anything with a pit in it, peaches, plums, apricots, nectarines, cherries, and the like. They tend to be very vigorous species, and yet there aren't very good dwarfing rootstocks. Citation is your rootstock of choice for semi-dwarfing stone fruits. And one that I've been fooling around with, and the Mariana 2624 is about the same as Citation. One that I've been fooling around with, and I think I can, in good conscience, recommend it to you for plums, and that is Krimsk, which is another Russian rootstock. It's cool to say Krimsk. Krimsk 1, because there's a whole series of them. And I've been able to keep plums that are generally 12, 15, 18 feet at 6 to 8 feet, and they're fairly productive. So some choices for you out there. But think about it. You know, what size do you have to allot to a tree? And choose a corresponding rootstock. It's going to help you out. Okay. Let's move on. Let's talk about shopping for trees. Let's just say you want to get a quality tree. There are two types of trees out there as depicted on this slide. One is called a whip. It's just the stick, the trunk. It's not branched. The other is called a branch tree, as you see on the right. You want to get a branch tree. A bigger tree with more branches will have more leaves, will photosynthesize better, and will grow quicker and get you to fruiting sooner. The tree on the left, the little whip there, it'll look like the tree on the right in 2+ years. So if you can, get a branch tree. You want a tall tree, up to 7 feet, at least 4 or 5 feet, up to 7 or 8 feet tall. And you want to look at what's called the caliper of the tree, and that's the diameter 2 inches above the bud union. You see that little hook here? And a little stem scar, that's the bud union. That's where the top part, the sign, the variety, was budded onto the rootstock. Like that. But you measure the caliper or the diameter of the tree trunk 2 inches above that. And you want to get a bigger tree is better. And they've done studies that the bigger tree, 1/2 inch caliper or bigger, up to 7/8, 3/4, 7/8 is good. Bigger is better, pretty much. Costs you a little more, but it pays back not even in the end, even just quickly like that. But they've done studies that shows that the bigger tree at planting in terms of caliper and branch will be not only just come into fruiting earlier, but it will have more fruit for quite a decade and a half than the smaller tree. Okay, we can move on. That's kind of what I just talked about. What do you want? You want a tree that has a good caliper. You want a tree that has a good number of branches in terms of length and also their distribution horizontally and vertically. And you want a tree that's tall, and you want a tree that has a good root system. Now, when you look at bare root trees, you'll say, yikes, that is a skimpy root system. In a comparative sense, they're way top heavy, but in a relative sense, you need more roots rather than less roots. Okay, let's move on. In Santa Cruz County, what grows well? Apples, pears, plums, and pluots. A pluot is a cross between a plum and an apricot. It amounts to being the sweetest plum you ever ate. Quinces, persimmons, some figs, most notably Mission, White Genoa, Osborne Prolific, and perversely Desert King does well on the coast here. Walnuts do well here. In fact, you may have heard of Walnut Street. Well, I walked it last year and there's no walnuts left on it. But when I first moved to town, down by where PetSmart and all those shopping center is on the river levee, that was a huge walnut grove. What grows passably well in Santa Cruz? Apricots and apriums. You get a crop 1 in 5 years. Pomegranates, you'll get some fruit and they'll be all right, but not great. Peaches and nectarines grow great here. They fruit well, and often if we have reasonable summers, they'll get sweet as all get out, but they are extremely subject to a leaf fungus called peach leaf curl, to the point where the tree can totally defoliate. It'll refoliate, but it takes a toll on the tree. And cherries just don't do well here. They do well in the Santa Clara Valley, but I found Stella to be an exception. It's a dead ringer for a Bing, and it's really good. And it's kind of a natural dwarf. The old joke about cherries is, well, they're tall, right? So tall cherries are for the birds, but Stella can be maintained at about 8 to 10 feet. Let's keep going. Here's some sources you can buy locally, you can buy online. Trees of Antiquity is the only reputable quality organic tree nursery I can think of offhand. Rain Tree has an amazing array of varieties, only one rootstock for most of their trees. Stark Brothers in Columbia, Missouri is really good too. Cloud Mountain is kind of a small nursery up north in Oregon, and they have an amazing array of varieties. As I said, local nurseries stock the day will. In our area here, San Lorenzo Garden Center, Midtown or downtown by Nevada River, the Garden Company on North Mission, and Sierra Azul and Aladdin down in South County are excellent tree nurseries with really knowledgeable service people. Okay. Apparently we're going to plant a tree. So you've got your tree, bare root. If you get it as soon as you can, you plant it. Any time that elapses, you need to what's called heal that tree in. Is you just put it in a piece of ground and it'll hold. If it's going to be more than a week or so, have it at 45 degrees facing north, and that keeps the buds from breaking from dormancy. But once you're ready to plant that tree, check the roots. If they're not wet, soak the roots, maybe 1 to 3 hours, not longer. Digging the hole, what's that old expression? Don't put a $5 tree in a 50-cent hole. It needs to be updated for inflation. Don't put a $30 tree in a $3 hole. Don't skimp. Dig a hole wider and deeper in the roots, certainly, but I generally would recommend ample, 2 plus 3 feet wide and maybe 2 feet deep. Fracture or fork the bottom of the soil for drainage. Gophers, gopher baskets. If you live in an area that's very prone to gophers, like a sandy meadow, if you are not willing to trap gophers or have someone trap gophers for you, you might consider using a gopher basket. I hate them, and yet they're utilitarian, of course. I've seen a gopher take down a 7-foot tree. And figs must be filet mignon or chocolate truffles for them. They just devour figs. Not the figs, but the roots. So you might consider either buying or making your own gopher wire basket. If your soil is in good shape, stop. Don't you do it, don't you do it, don't you break my heart, don't plant that tree, do some cover cropping, composting and such. But if your soil is in reasonable shape, plant that tree today. You don't need to amend the soil, period, drop the mic and all that. You probably don't want to put fertilizer in the hole. You really don't want fertilizer, certainly not chemical fertilizer, but even organic fertilizers in contact with the roots. What you do is you plant the tree and then you top dress it with some fertilizer. But you probably don't even need to put compost in the fill soil if your soil is reasonably well. If it's not, I would say no more than 25% of whatever the volume of the soil compost added to it. Pre-mix it, homogenize it, and then put it in the soil. But really what you want to do is improve your soil so you have a good soil environment for the tree to grow in. And sprinkle the roots with mycorrhizal powder. There are innumerable products of them. This is a fungi, a series of fungi species that live in association with plant, in this case, tree roots. They're ecto and endo. They exist outside of, and some migrate into and grow inside the roots. These are basically root extenders. They can extend the root mass of the tree, and they go out and forage for water and nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus, bring it up into the core of the root. And so it's a mutualism, a symbiotic relationship between a home, the roots for the mycorrhizal fungi, and nutrients and water for the tree, like that. It's really cheap, really easy to do. Just sprinkle a little on your roots prior to planting. Next. Oh, look, we gave a workshop a number of years ago at the farm. We planted some trees. So on the left are two friends of mine, former students, now colleagues. On the right, Sky DeMuro. On the left, Zoe Hitchner. Farmers, orchardists, flower growers, flower cutters, flower arrangers extraordinaire. And they have dug an ample hole. Yeah, they have, and they're setting the tree. And then the tree is magic. The tree has been planted in the middle slide here. Here I am watering it in. And this is purposeful. Look, when you're planting a tree, as you're filling the soil in, stop a couple, 3 times and tamp it down a little bit. Don't stomp it, but tamp it down lightly. Once you planted the tree and you water it, you do what I call mud it up. This is not a cute little delphinium or lettuce seedling that you have to, emulate a gentle spring rain in terms of watering it. You're mudding it up. You got a little basin. Good transplanting, whatever the plant, whatever the size of the plant, is predicated on good root soil contact. This will get you there. You can access your inner child, play with mud, all that stuff. Okay, next slide. The bud union, which I can't see because I see your faces on the screen here, is that little hook in the trunk at the base. And again, that's where rootstock and scion were budded. That's the most vulnerable portion of the tree, prone to rot. And it's really important for that to be above the soil level, 2 to 4 inches. The other thing is if you bury the stem, the trunk, the scion, the variety, it undoes the dwarfing nature of the rootstock and you grow a full-size 30-foot tree. So bud union, 2 to 4 inches above the soil level. Stem scar, that little spot on the base of the trunk where the budding occurred. There's a little scar from when they cut off, pruned out the trunk of the rootstock once the bud of the variety took and grew into what is now your tree. That's the most vulnerable portion of the tree. So if you have it facing north, the trunk of the tree will shield it. That's probably, somewhat important on the coast. That's probably critical inland. Also, if you live inland, it's probably a good idea to whitewash your tree trunk for the first couple of years until you get enough of a canopy to shade the tree. And you do that with just use a water-based latex, cut it half with water and paint it onto the tree. It's kind of a pas de deux act, do-si-do and all that. It kind of takes 2 people to plant a tree. One holds, one fills, and then tamps accordingly. And then you water in like that. After you've planted the tree, this is my recommendation, use a granular organic certified fertilizer. There's tons of them out there. Sustain is one, Dr. Earth, Gardener in Bloom, Blood Meal, and on. And use anywhere from about a half a pound to a pound of it. Sprinkle it on the surface in about a 2+ foot radius or circumference like that. And then add on to that 2 or 3 shovelfuls of compost. Work that lightly into the soil 2 to 4 inches with a fork, and then mulch over it with the aforementioned revered wood chips as a mulch. Okay, next. Apparently, we have a madman roaming the hills of Santa Cruz, and he's going to talk to you about planting a fruit tree. I'm going to run and hide. Here you go. Push the button. Hi, folks. Let's quickly talk about planting a dormant fruit tree. We could talk aesthetics, philosophy, even physiology and rationale later. Let's put this tree in the ground and let's prune it. What I have here is a quality tree. I mean, an extremely high quality tree. What comprises a quality tree? You want a tall tree, 4, 5, 7 feet tall,
number of branches that are well distributed both horizontally and vertically, of good length, and a thick caliper tree. Caliper is the measurement, the diameter of the trunk, 2 inches above the bud union. This is about a 3/4 caliper tree. And you want a good root system. Now keep in mind that a good root system, and this is a good root system, seems skimpy compared to the top part of the tree, but that's just the way it is. I have roughed out a hole here. It's about 2 feet deep and 3 feet wide. One thing you'll notice is that fruit tree roots are not symmetrical to it. So I've just roughed out a hole that these roots will fit in. Now when you plant, you want to make sure that the bud union, this bulbous area here, is 2 to 4 inches above the soil level. So let's place the tree in the ground. I'm going to place it with the bud so that the trunk of the tree protects that. That's the most vulnerable portion of the tree in terms of sun scald. So I'm going to put this tree in the ground, and we need a pause.
All right, there's a sequel apparently.
About planting a dormant. As you can see, I placed the tree in the hole. The dimensions are good. The roots are spread. I have a little stick here. That's a leveling stick to show the true soil level. Again, when I plant the tree, I want to make sure the bud union is above the true soil line. But what I have in my hand here is a package of mycorrhizal fungi powder, or as I call it, magic pixie dust. This is a good thing to sprinkle on the roots of your trees before you plant them. It comes with a little spoonful here. And what this is a number of species of mycorrhizal fungi which live in association with tree roots, help them as root extenders and help them to forage for both water, nitrogen, and phosphorus. It's a good thing, like I said, magic pixie dust get you there. So I'm just going to sprinkle a couple of tablespoons on the roots. A little dab will do you. And well, it's not rocket science. I'm now going to bury the tree, as it were, or bury the root system. So I'll just start, and I'll do this in a couple, 3 stages. So I put maybe a third, half of the soil in, and now I'm gonna just tread on the soil a little bit to tamp down the soil. The tree stands erect, and then I'll finish the job. I might note this is something better done with a partner. I don't have a partner right now. So this soil is much improved. Thus, I didn't add compost to it. If your soil isn't quite as good as this, you might consider augmenting the fill soil with a little bit of compost. I'm going to go around to the other side. Just turn it off. Okay, let's finish the job. A little more. No, I'm always reticent to step on the soil. I'm going to just lightly tread on it. One of the keys to success with transplanting, whether it's a lettuce, a delphinium, or a fruit tree, is good soil root contact. So I've ensured that here. And we are good to go. What I would do next is sprinkle 2 or 3 shovelfuls of compost in a 2-foot circle around the base of the tree. Put on about 1 pound of organic certified granular fertilizer. Work that into the soil 2 to 4 inches, and then mulch off with wood chips. Then I would water in. You can make a basin. and just hand water it. And when you're talking about watering in a fruit tree, again, it's not a little delphinium or a lettuce seedling. You really mud it up. You just saturate it. And that again gets you good root soil contact. Okay, we're good to prune this tree next. Okay, let's finish the job.
Okay, let's show the pruning in the driveway, Delise, and then maybe given the time, we could just take questions on planting and pruning here. Next week is more in depth on pruning. But if you look at this slide here before we go to the, I'm calling our production crew the not quite ready for prime time driveway company. But before we go to that, this is a rendering. Fruit trees are grown to geometric shapes. There's a number of them. The object is to both intercept as much sunlight as you can, and to, very importantly, to allow sunlight to penetrate to the core of the tree. So the two easiest forms are on the left, a modified central leader, an inverted comb, and on the right, an open center, big sun cup like that. Another way you can look at the modified central leader is an isosceles triangle. Let's do the clip in the driveway of pruning.
With trees, you have two options. Option one, an unbranched tree, AKA a whip, or a branched tree. Let me show you how to prune these two trees. It's really quite simple. Let's do the whip first. You want to make a heading cut on the trunk, the whip, about 6 or 8 inches above where you want your branching to start. That's traditionally done at 18 to 24 inches. And if you look at the base of the tree here, you see this little hook in the trunk. That's where the bud was attached when it was budded. And so if the bud goes this way, you want to pick a bud for your top bud that goes the opposite way. That's it. What's going to happen now is that the lead bud will assume apical dominance, grow up. Maybe you want to get 2, 3, 4 feet this year from it. And the next 3 to 5 buds down, if you're living right, will break from dormancy and form the initial branch scaffold for this tree. That's it. But if you can get a branched tree, you're so much better off. This tree, handsome young tree, is about 2+ years down the road from where that whip's at. That whip will get here in a couple, 3 years. And what I like about buying trees locally is I can inspect the individual tree, both the root and the shoot system, but I also can look at it and see where I'm going. That is, I know I want to grow it into this tree form. In this case, an open center form. And some trees just lend themselves more to being open center and some to modified central leader. This is really quite simple. Don't be alarmed. The open center is composed of 3 to 5 primary branches that are spread equidistant one from another around 360 degrees of the trunk, and they grow up and out at about a 60 to 70 degree angle, and it might look about like that. There I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay in number, but you notice this branch is over this branch, and that's a no-no. This branch will very quickly shade out this branch. So I'm going to go with 4, and I could pick either of these, but I'm going to keep the one that's higher up. And this is a thinning cut. I thinned it out, put it on the ground. And the reason I made that choice is you want as much vertical spacing between these branches as you can get. So that this one was a little higher up than that one, thus it gets to stick around. And these trees are almost, these branches are almost perfect in their horizontal distribution, one growing out there, one here, one there. I might train this just a notch like that to have it be equidistant again between its 2 neighboring branches. And then I'm going to make a pruning cut on each branch, and the general rule for a just planted tree is cut it back about half its length and cut it to a underfacing bud so the buds are directional arrows. So if a bud points in this direction, that will be the resumption of growth. In this direction, that's the way it'll grow. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. We're done. Okay, we're going to prune this.
Okay, a little redundant, but there you go. We'll do more with pruning next week. We're hoping to have a couple of little more professional videos for you. We'll see. But so you improved your soil. You selected your site. You improved your soil. You got yourself a quality tree. You planted that tree. You fertilized it and mulched it and watered it accordingly. Fruit trees need pollinators. Part of your job is to foster biodiversity and attract what I call the 3 Ps. Pollinators, native and non-native, honeybees and other native bees. The 3 Ps are pollinators, predators, and parasitoids. Predators and parasitoids are simply beneficial insects that can predate on harmful insects. And you foster biodiversity in that regard. You encourage them to come and hang around with you, as it were, by planting flowers. Flowers, all manner of flowers, but particularly members of the Compositae or the daisy family, members of the carnation family, members of the umbelliferae or Apiaceae family, the carrot family, dill, parsley, etc. The native shrub buckwheat and its relatives are really good at attracting pollinators, again, native and non-native. So grow flowers. Now you may think flowers are pretty and they make great bouquets. But that's not why flowers are around. A flower is simply an advertisement, an attraction. It says in one form or another, color, scent, form, to a pollinator, yoo-hoo, come on over here. I got a reward for you. And what's that reward? It's pollen and nectar, protein and carbohydrates, 2 basic building blocks of any diet. So you can create a lush habitat by planting your yard, your farm, your garden with tiered plantings. You can grow flowers, some of the ones I mentioned previously, and attract these pollinators and beneficial insects. What we have on this slide here is the cutest thing in the world, a bee hotel. This is a little thing you could actually just get some sticks and tie them together. You could drill out a 2x4 in the end and make some recesses in it. Or you can purchase these really groovy bee hotels. I have no idea what the BB stands for. Bed and breakfast for bees? Yeah, sure. But this is a mason bee hut hotel, and they're very easy to purchase. You can get One Green World, a great nursery online, sells them. Rain Tree Nursery. Most entities online that sell fruit trees will sell mason bees. So you can buy them and you can get some sort of a housing unit like this and you can start to raise them. They are tough critters. They can fly when the temperatures are really low and the wind is high and the rain is wicked at times when the honeybee is hunkered down. So they can really help you out with getting good pollination, thus fruit set on your fruit trees, particularly during inclement weather in the spring. The other thing is they will naturalize on your property. So once you make an investment and you get going with them, they're self-perpetuating. And they're just really cool to watch. They're non-stinging and they don't mind living next to other bees, but they're not colony bees like the European honeybee. So the mason bee, it's really great. When you go to buy them, make sure you're getting the Western species, not the Eastern species. I think I'm gonna stop. It's a mercy rule, like in Little League, huh?
Welcome back, everybody. Vanessa's going to share our little presentation again, and we're going to do Q&A again. If anybody's got questions now that they've heard Orin's amazing presentation. Sure, I've got the Q&A open. Yes. All right, now that we've heard from Warren, what do you think? We have a new question. What is your opinion on painting the trunk of a bare root tree or wrapping it?
Painting, you can do it. Again, I don't think it's necessary on the coast. If you're up the hill, maybe above 1,000, 1,500 feet. If you're inland in the valleys, I would. You simply take, you get a water-based latex and you cut it half with water and you paint it on the trunk. It's just a protective thing. It degrades and is basically gone by the end of the season. You might do it the second year, and then thereafter the canopy, the shade of the canopy of the tree should be sufficient. Tree collars, tree wraps can be beneficial if you have problems with rodents, rabbits, voles, and mice. It just protects the trunk.
Great. We had a question earlier about an Asian pear. Somebody's just moved into a house in San Jose and they have an Asian pear with 2 trunks. And they want to know if they should just like chop one of them off.
Well, it's kind of like playing cards, playing poker. You wish you had a better hand, but you play the hand you're dealt. You've got 2 trunks, and unless it's really gnarly and intertwined, I'd stay with it. The important thing is up into the canopy, are the branches reasonably well spread, and can you get some sunlight on that branch structure to help photosynthesize and make fruit? So the deal with tree training and pruning, and trees are pruned to geometric forms, is don't be too strict about it. You need to make sure that you have a form that allows light into the core of the tree, but it doesn't have to be literally by the book. If you want to send me a photograph, I could make I always say diagnostics from a distance can be dangerous, so I could make a maybe more informed response.
How do you attract bees to the bee hotel? Somebody wants to know.
Okay, I just ordered 200 new mason bees, so we have some that are resident to re-up our stand, our colony, our population. When they come, they'll be in a cocoon form, and you put them on top of the little house there. And when the temperatures warm up significantly above 45 degrees, they'll hatch out. First, the males will come out and they'll just hang around for 2 or 3 days. And then the females will hatch, male and female will mate, and the female will go into the little recesses in the bee hotel, put an egg there. Then it'll go and make hundreds of trips to get pollen and nectar and make a little pollen ball. And when it's done that, it seals it off a little chamber with mud. It'll make 6 or 8 of them in the whole run of the 6 to 8 inch recess there. Once you've got them, if you have flowers on your property, and particularly fruit tree flowers, research has shown that these mason bees eat almost exclusively tree pollen. You're good to go. And basically the planting of flowers attracts pollinated insects, bees, whether they're native or the European honeybee. And blue flowers are really a color that's preferred by honeybees. So any number of blue flowers out there. So just plant flowers. It's pretty simple.
Just plant flowers. There's a companion crop, huh? Is eucalyptus mulch okay to use?
Yeah, okay, here's the deal. When I talk about wood chip mulch, if you read the literature, it'll refer to it as ramial wood chips, R-A-M-I-A-L. And that ramial just means round branches. My response is, really, round branches? What are the odds of that? Aren't they all round? But the reference technically is branches that are about less than 3 inches in diameter from deciduous trees, not evergreens like the eucalyptus or conifers or redwoods. And here's the deal. For 40 years, I've been using the wood chips from the tree crew on campus. We have almost exclusively just conifers and eucalyptus. And sometimes it even smells like a mentholated eucalyptus cough drop or something when you spread it. And I have not seen any deleterious effects from using eucalyptus or conifer leaves as a mulch. Now, let me specify. In perennial woody crops, roses, lilacs, fruit trees, and as a surface mulch. You're not turning this stuff into the ground in a vegetable garden. It's a different deal.
Is the same true for walnut?
Yep.
Okay.
Let me say, the reason that you're told not to use these things is they have a lot of resins, tannins, acids, etc., and they can be deleterious. Now, again, that's if you flip them into the soil, but not as a surface mulch, and not in trees, not in annual crops.
Okay. And do you have any tips to deal with squirrels and rats eating fruit? I know.
Let me just say this, take some solace, you're not alone. When I first came out to California, I grew up in these tree squirrels, where are they? And it was like one across the street at Cal College, and I would go over and watch, oh, cool. And now they're everywhere. They are extremely problematic, and the populations are on the rise. You can try, if there's anywhere that a tree can jump from another tree or a building, they'll jump onto your tree, and they know when to come, right about when the fruit's ripe. If you have a tree and it's free and clear, as it were, and you could put some sort of a wire mesh around the base, this needs to be a considerable height, like a foot or so, it can keep them off. I have a neighbor down the street who has a persimmon tree and was losing all her persimmons every year. So her solution was she put a little portable radio out there with right-wing talk show stuff on it. Just did the trick just great.
Leftist rodents, okay. Okay, this is interesting. Can you graft? We have an older plum that's not really very vigorous anymore, and we're wondering if we can graft new material onto it, or should she replace it?
Yeah, I don't know. You could go either way. I would try to graft other varieties, or another variety, or a number of other varieties onto it. And the reason I would do that is because you have a marvelous existing root structure that will very quickly regrow those new grass, and you probably be to fruit in 2 or 3 years. Or you can say, enough is enough, take it out and plant a new one. But try grafting it. Now, grafting is not that hard. There's some stuff online. In this area, the Rare Fruit Growers usually gives a grafting workshop around this time of year. They also have a scion exchange, so you can go and get sticks of varieties you could graft onto your trees. And again, if you live in this area, dial 1-800 Matthew Sutton. No, I don't mean that literally. I mean, call or email orchardkeepers.com, and they'll come out and they'll graft your trees for you.
How close together can you plant fruit trees in small gardens? And in fact, what do you recommend for small suburban type gardens?
Well, as mentioned shown in the slide, look for dwarfing rootstocks. I don't think I would do plums. They're just very vigorous. I definitely wouldn't do cherries. Peaches, yeah, maybe. There are what are called genetic dwarf peaches, and these are peaches that, ironically, the rootstock is full size, but the top part of the scion is short. They only get 3-4 feet tall. They're really pretty easy, and they are size controlling, self-size controlling like that. Apples probably are your best bet, and use some of the dwarfing rootstocks. If you want to get a mini dwarf, as I showed you on that slide last year, M27 is an excellent, very dwarfing rootstock, 4 to 6 foot tree, and Rain Tree Nursery up in Oregon has them. Another good one is, which is hard to find another good rootstock, is P22, which P is for Poland. But M27 is the more readily available rootstock. Try to grow your apples on that. They're sometimes just generically referred to in catalogs as mini dwarfs.
Can you recommend a low chill variety for Southern California?
Of?
Oh, you're gonna make me find it. Fruit trees.
Aha, yeah.
So that's
Stone fruits
not
would be
clear.
better in Southern California, period. Drop the mic and all that stuff. If you want to grow pears, good luck. Asian pears, yeah, maybe. But there are some low chill apples that were principally developed in Israel. They have one is called Anna, A-N-N-A. One is called Dorset Golden, which is actually a found seedling in the hills of Jamaica. One is called Einsheimer, and there's a few others. So look up low chill apples. They're all of pretty good to really good eating quality, and they will bloom and fruit for you in a low chill area like Southern California. But I would tend to grow, heck, if I lived in Southern California, I'd be growing subtropicals. And excuse me. But you can grow apples there. I have a friend whose grandparents have a citrus orchard in Central Florida, definitely a low chill area, the Orlando area. And he went and made a big deal about getting a low chill apple and planting it there. And his grandfather went around town saying, you know, my grandson, he graduated from Stanford, but he's an idiot. He thinks he can grow apples here. And then 3 years later, when the tree fruited abundantly, he went around town saying, you know, my grandson, he's a genius. So low chill varieties.
Very cool. Somebody wants to know about growing Sambucus, which I have no idea what that is.
Sambucus, elderberry. Yeah, they grow great.
Elderberry.
Kind of weedy in a good way, rambunctious all over the place. All you do is plant them, water them a little bit, harvest them. They're a great, beautiful flower, and like that. Like make elderberry wine if you choose, I suppose, or some apothecary type thing like that. They need cross-pollination, so you need 2 varieties. Rain Tree Nursery, as aforementioned, has some good sources of them. They grow really well in this area, Central Coastal California. In fact, they grow well in most areas where apples and pears can grow.
Okay. Do pecans grow here?
Does what?
Somebody is asking about pecans.
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 No, nuts don't grow very well here at all, excepting the walnut. Would that they did. Move to Georgia.
Okay. Well, we're kind of there. The questions are coming in slowly now. So I would like, Vanessa, if you would show the, first I'm going to thank you, Orin, for your amazing brain.
I want to thank people for their forbearance. But can I just duck in here with a little quote, closing quote to y'all? Here's the quote: "To forget how to dig the earth and tend the soil is to forget ourselves," by Mahatma Gandhi. Perhaps you've heard of him.
Very nice. So Jessica, so sorry, my brain. Vanessa, could you share the last few slides? So before that is the events, and I want to talk about the events that are coming up. All right, everybody who is still on the call, if you're looking at our calendar of events online, you know that we have some in-person fruit tree pruning and training classes. Well, we have a pretty good idea that that's going to have to be canceled. The in-person, it's a little too early and not ready for prime time yet, COVID and all that. So those will probably be replaced with a virtual session, a lot like this one. If you signed up for either of those, you'll get reimbursed. But
Yeah,
I just wanted to let you know.
As soon as we can assemble together, not having to be 6 feet apart, not wear masks, I'm so down for giving in-person workshops again, but not quite yet.
Is so down. So doesn't like doing these on online things.
I hate it.
We are going to have with Daryl Wong, who is one of our other garden managers down on the farm, is going to be doing a soil management for home gardeners. That's going to be awesome. That will be low cost. It's not actually free. It's $5, but that's a virtual
It's
one.
worth every penny of it. Daryl Long is our farm manager, research site manager at the farm. He is extremely knowledgeable both about the technical aspects of soil, but he's a farmer and a grower, so he knows it kind of get down in the dirt wise too. So
Yeah.
it'll be a good presentation. It will inform you on how to assess and improve your soil.
So stay tuned on the website, Center for Agroecology. And could you go to the next slide, please? We always like to acknowledge the Amamutsan tribal band, the land that we are standing on whenever we're in on campus is rightfully theirs. And we're working with them to steward the land as we move into this future.
And you can
climate
also
change,
support them by
different things.
joining their organization. They have a number of workshops and work days. And their forebears were walking this ground in Santa Cruz County 8,000 to 12,000 years ago, before they were in the 1700s, wrongly taken from the land and taken to the missions at San Juan Bautista and Santa Cruz.
Thank you, Orin. Next slide, please. I just want to go to the next one after this. Orin wrote a book, Fruit Trees for Every Garden. So this is a great companion for this information. And if this all went by pretty quickly for you and it's hard to retain it, we will be sending out the recording. We will be sending out the presentation. We will be sending out the extra links. We will send out Orin's email address, and we recommend this book as well. And with that, I think we're going to let you go and thank everyone for being here.
Thanks a lot, folks. Hope to
Stay
see
well.
hope to see you in person soon.
Yes.